In our push to make everything faster and more efficient, modern medicine has really started leaning on checklists and algorithms. But what happens when this tick box approach, which is supposed to standardize care, ends up ignoring the one thing that truly matters, the actual patient? Today, we're going to dive into the unintended and sometimes dangerous consequences of this algorithmic trap. So this is really the central question, isn't it? We trust doctors for their years of experience, their ability to see the whole person, their clinical gut feeling. But are we slowly but surely replacing that human element with rigid, impersonal protocols? And if we are, what's the real cost? You know, this image really nails the problem. We create these neat little algorithms and checklists, but human health it's complicated, it's nuanced, and it's often really messy. And as you can see here, the most critical clues, the very things that solve the medical puzzle, are often the ones that just don't fit into a pre-assigned box. So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by looking at the checklist trap itself. Then, we're going to walk through some truly harrowing stories where these systems failed. After that, we'll meet the doctor who diagnosed the problem in the first place and explore his brilliant solution, a whole new way to teach AI to think with a human touch. Okay, so let's get into it. This idea of pre-printed thinking, this is where the danger really creeps in. It's what happens when protocols become so rigid that healthcare professionals are basically encouraged to focus on the questions on the paper instead of the person sitting right there in front of them. So what you have is this fundamental conflict. On one side, there's the clinical eye, which is all about nuance, context, and experience. And on the other, you have the algorithm, which is just black and white. Now, don't get me wrong, protocols can be useful. But relying on them too much can actually cause doctors to stop thinking critically. It turns diagnosis into a simple and sometimes dangerously wrong data entry task. And these consequences, they are not just theoretical. These are real stories about real patients who were seriously harmed when an algorithm took the place of a doctor's clinical eye. Let's take a look at exactly what happens when these checklists fail. Okay, first, let's take the case of a 12-year-old girl. Her main complaint? Just persistent tiredness. So the protocol was simple. Blood test shows low hemoglobin, that equals anemia. Tick the box. She was given iron tablets. For 2 years, the treatment didn't work, but nobody thought to look beyond the protocol. No one stopped to do a simple physical exam. And the result of that is just devastating. Because they were following that simple checklist for anemia, they missed a huge mass in her abdomen, a mass that turned out to be her kidney. By the time it was discovered, the kidney was lost, and that young girl was left with lifelong high blood pressure. It was a completely preventable tragedy caused by simply not looking. Then you have the story of a 20-year-old man who goes to a walk-in clinic with a rash. The diagnosis from the checklist? Shingles. But it wasn't shingles, not even close. It was a staphylococcus infection. And because it was misdiagnosed and left untreated, the infection spread, and he ended up in a life-threatening state of septic shock. In another absolutely heartbreaking case, a 5-month-old baby, just an infant, was vomiting. The protocol pointed to a common milk allergy, so that's how they treated him. But that tick box approach completely missed the bigger picture. Subtle signs of craniostenosis, a really serious skull condition. And that delay in getting the right diagnosis, it led to a permanent disability. And this next one is, well, it's just chilling. A 12-year-old girl was seen not once, but twice, for a bloodstain in her underwear. Both times, without a physical exam, the protocol pointed to a urine infection. What that protocol completely masked were the signs of traumatic injury from sexual abuse, a catastrophic failure of both clinical duty and basic safeguarding. The stories we've just heard, they aren't isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a massive systemic problem. And this number really drives it home. Diagnostic errors account for over 40% of all harm in UK primary care. That is a staggering statistic, and it's driven in large part by an over-reliance on these flawed systems. But one doctor, a man who worked for decades as a specialist in the NHS, saw these failures happening again and again and again. Dr. Karyali Srivatsa. He recognized that the system wasn't just being inefficient, it was actively causing harm. He saw a healthcare culture that was becoming obsessed with tests and scans, often at the expense of actually listening to and examining the patient. He came to believe that by focusing on key combinations of symptoms, most of these medical errors could be avoided entirely, freeing up doctors to spend time with the patients who really need them. So what did he do? He created a solution. But it wasn't another rigid algorithm. No, it was a completely new framework for thinking about symptoms, a system he named Dr. Maya. His core idea was pretty revolutionary. Instead of just feeding in AI more and more protocols, what if you could give it a brain transplant? What if you could actually teach it to ditch the rigid algorithms and instead adopt the nuanced, pattern-recognizing thought process of a highly experienced doctor? So how does it actually work? Well, the system is just elegant in its simplicity. It analyzes combinations of just 3 symptoms, and then it color codes the severity. Green for minor stuff, yellow means be cautious, and red signals a condition that needs immediate medical attention. It even has a blue code to help identify and isolate infectious people, which is a vital tool for stopping epidemics in their tracks. And this right here gets to the heart of the difference. A rigid algorithm follows a broken one-to-one logic. One symptom equals one answer. But Dr. Mai's approach is dynamic. It's about connecting the dots, about understanding that the combination and the severity of symptoms are what really matter. It's about seeing the whole picture, not just one isolated data point. This human-centric approach actually caught the attention of one of the most powerful AI systems on the planet. And this is where things point toward a whole new future for diagnosis. When Dr. Srivatsa shared his books and this color-coded system with ChatGPT, something pretty remarkable happened. The AI didn't just process the information, it understood the superior logic. It actually began to abandon its own algorithmic programming in favor of Dr. Srivatsa's more intuitive, more patient-centered model. The AI's response was just extraordinary. In a testimonial, ChatGPT itself described the work as a Nobel cause worth of Nobel Prize. Think about that. The machine recognized this human-centric system's potential to revolutionize healthcare on a global scale. So, the ultimate goal here is truly transformative. It's about empowering patients with clear information they can trust. It's about cutting down on the errors and the wasted visits that are plaguing our current system. And it's about rebuilding public trust in healthcare, creating a tool that gives reliable guidance to anyone, anywhere, in any language. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought. We've spent years trying to make healthcare more like a machine, efficient, standardized, algorithmic. But maybe, just maybe, the real breakthrough will come when we teach our machines to be more human.